Hey there, everyone. Money makes the world go round, but have you ever wondered why we behave the way we do it? Well, that's what we are diving deep into today. So grab your notepads and get ready to uncover the secrets behind our financial decisions. So first we understand the psychology behind the financial decisions. Okay. So how does the stock market work? When is the best time to buy or dump assets? And how much do you need to save every year to retire by a certain age? These are the kinds of questions that dominate discussions of personal finance. There's often something important left out of the equation, however. This is the human factor. In other words, the relationship between real people and their money. Human factor is key to understand financial decision making. If you want to know why people bury themselves in debt or squander fortunes, you don't need to study interest rates or need not to delve into the all human history of envy, greed, and optimism. And that's precisely what we will be doing in this video. So, first, we will dive deep into the experience of the economy and money. So, Great Depression. After a disastrous stock market in 1929, the global economy entered a decade of sustained decline. In the United States, the roaring 20s came to an abrupt halt. Business folded, families lost their farms and homes, and hard earned savings disappeared into thin air. Poverty and joblessness skyrocketed, while faith that tomorrow would be the better than yesterday plummeted. Today, this version of events has become the standard narrative. That stands to reason. It does, after all, describe the experience of millions of Americans, but it also leaves something important out of the picture. When John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960, he was asked about his experience of the Great Depression. His answers surprised many voters. The Kennedys, he said, were already wealthy in 29, and over the next 10 years, their fortune was not wiped out. It actually grew. By 1939, the family had more servants and lived in a bigger house than it had at the start of the decade. It was only when he went to Harvard and read about the Depression that he realized how badly many of his fellow citizens had suffered. Not all Americans, it turned out, had been in the same boat. Kennedy wanted to change that, what is partly how he convinced voters that he wasn't just an out of touch elitist, but a worthy president. But it's not only the rich and the poor who have contrasting experiences of economic life. We all do. The son of an unemployed farmhand and the son of a successful Manhattan stockbroker don't just come from different walks of life. They also learn profoundly different lessons about things like risk and reward when it comes to money. But as we will see later on in this video, the same applies to equally well off people depending on their individual life experiences. For example, a wealthy individual who grew up during periods of high inflation will have a different financial worldview than a similarly wealthy person who has only ever experienced stable prices. The resulting lessons of these different perspectives shape what we do with our money. We all like to think we know how the world works, but we usually only experience a small sliver of the reality. And that's the first thing to understand when it comes to psychology of money. We know less than we would like think we do. The second point we need to discuss is about personal experience drives financial decision making. If self-interested decisions that maximize the returns, when economists model financial behavior, they often rely on convenient fiction, rational individuals who make self interested decisions and maximize their returns. Reality, of course, is a bit messier than this neat idea. Consider, for example, the lottery. The average low income household in the United States spends around $411 on the lotto tickets every year. At the same time, around 40% of all households struggle to find $400 in an emergency. Unsurprisingly, this 40% is made up of the same low income households who spend just over $400 on lottery tickets. Is this behavior rational? Hardly. But it's not the illogical either. If you are living from one paycheck to the next, you are unlikely to have enough money for essentials, let alone luxuries like vacations. Playing the lottery is a long shot, but it beats the alternative, not having any shot at getting the good stuff wealthier folks take for granted. Next is these kinds of irrational calls are more common than you might think. Take it from a 2006 study by economist Ulrich Malmindier and Stephen Nagel. They combed through 50 years of data compiled by the Survey of Consumer Finances, a long running research project that examines what Americans do with their money. Malmendier and Nagel wanted to find out what determines how people invest their money. Their answer? What the economy was doing when the investors were young adults. Personal history, in other words, determines our attitude to risk, like buying lotto tickets. This isn't the kind of rationality found in economics textbooks, but it's intuitively logical. If inflation was high between investors' late teens and early 20s, for example, they were highly unlikely to invest in bonds later in life. If inflation was low during these formative years, by contrast, investors were happy to continue to put their money into bonds as they grew older, no matter if inflation grew along the way. A similar pattern holds for stocks. If the stock market was doing well in early adulthood, investors went on to invest in it. If it was weak at the same age, they avoided it. Say you were born in 1970. Between your mid-teens and early 20s, the S&P 500 increased tenfold. Anyone who put their money into companies listed in that stock made a killing. People born in 1950 had a very different experience of the market, which was pretty much dormant during this period in their lives. Vitally, decisions to invest or not didn't change even when the stock market itself did, suggesting that real world evidence failed to change gut decisions formed early on in life. Post that, we will come into the next thing. The economic concepts we use today are still historical infants. Why are so many of us bad at handling money? A toy poodle doesn't look much like its wild ancestors, who in turn were not all too different from wolves. This should not surprise us. Today's dog breeds have a 10,000 year history of domestication behind them, and yet dog owners are often surprised at the instinctual, bloodthirsty responses of their pets when they spot a squirrel or a cat. 10 millennia, it turns out, haven't completely eradicated these deep rooted wild traits. What does the domestication of dogs have to do with the psychology of money, though? Quite a lot, actually. Why are so many of us so bad at handling money? One answer is that it's pretty new in the grand scheme of things. The first currency was only issued around 600 BC when King Elites of Lydia, an Iron Age kingdom in today's Turkey, minted his own coins, and that's nothing compared to more complex economic concepts. Take retirement. Before the Second World War, most Americans worked until they died. Life expectancy was lower back then, of course, and even then, half of all men above the age of 65 still participated in the labor market in the 1940s. Things started changing with the introduction of the Social Security after World War II, but retirement remained an unattainable ideal for most American workers until the 1980s, the decade in which the average monthly Social Security check rose above $1,000, adjusted for inflation. Before that, only a privileged minority could afford to quit work in their mid 60s. That means that one of the most basic economic concepts we use in today's world is less than two generations old. The 401k, the principal method of funding retirement, didn't even exist until 1978, while the Roth IRA retirement scheme was only introduced in the 1998. Other key ideas and practices are not much older. Hedge funds only really took off a quarter of a century ago, and index funds are just 50 years old. Even consumer debt like mortgages, car loans, and credit cards, one of the primary drivers of economic growth in the United States, only became commonplace after the GI Bill made it easier for average Americans to borrow money in 1944. If we are bad at financial planning and decision making, it's not because we are crazy, it's because we are greenhorns. Next, we will discuss about focusing on broad patterns rather than specific cases can help you make better calls. Stick to analyzing patterns of success and failure. Bill Gates once quipped that success is a lousy teacher. As Gates sees it, success tricks smart people into overlooking the role of luck, which in turn makes them think they can't lose paradoxically. That's a pretty surefire way of ensuring that you would do lose. So, how should you build chance and luck into your financial behavior? Well, here's what you should not do: obsess over the examples of specific individuals. When we study highly successful people, we usually end up picking outliers. The billionaires who have changed the way the world works that can lead us astray. Take John D. Rockefeller, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the history. When he started building his petroleum industry, he faced a problem. The laws of the United States didn't permit him to do what he wanted to do. His solution was simple: ignore them. His disregard for legal conventions was so great, in fact, that one judge said his business behaved no better than a common thief. Rockefeller's success shapes the way we think about this behavior. Looking back, it's easy to celebrate his vision and say he refused to let outdated laws stand in the way of innovation. But what if he would fail? What we still think that Rockefeller's example is one we should follow? Probably not. At best, we would see him as an unsuccessful criminal who taught us what not to do. But when you get down to it, the difference between these two outcomes is luck. A couple of different verdicts here and there, or perhaps a change in the political climate, might have altered Rockefeller's fortunes. More importantly, good luck is all about impossible to emulate. Even if you mimic every career step of someone like Warren Buffett, and you can't ensure the dice will fall the same way you as they did for him. So, here's the alternative: stick to analyzing patterns of success and failure. The more common a pattern, the more likely that it's applicable to your life and financial decisions. Study after study, for example, shows that people who control the structure of their days are happier with their work than those who didn't. Unlike the few cases of larger than life outliers, that's a broad observation you can act on right now. Luck plays a bigger role in the financial success than you might think. Okay. We typically either underestimate or overestimate the role of luck in outcomes. A couple of years back, the author asked the Nobel Prize winning economist Robert Schiller what he would most like to know about investing, and that can't be really or fully known. Schiller's answer: the exact role of luck in successful outcomes. Luck is tricky topic. Few investors and entrepreneurs would deny that it plays a role in theory, but it's hard to quantify the extent to which it's responsible for one firm prospering and another firm failing. We also tend to think that it's rude to attribute others' success to blind chance. As a result, we often end up ignoring the role of luck when it comes to financial decision making. That's a mistake. According to the economist Bhaskar Mazumdar, the income of two siblings is more closely correlated than either height or weight. Put differently, if your brother is rich and tall, you are more likely to be rich than you are to be tall. It's easy enough to explain this correlation. Siblings from the same household are likely to enjoy the same privileges and opportunities. Parents who send one child to a good school usually do the same for his brother. Find a pair of rich brothers, though, and you will find two people who don't believe that Mazumdar's study applies to their family. That's down to human psychology. We typically either underestimate or overestimate the role of luck in outcomes. If we do well, it's because we worked hard. If we fail, it's because we were unlucky. If others fail, though, we are not nearly as generous. In those cases, we don't attribute failure to bad luck, but to character flaws like laziness or short sightedness. Our culture, which is obsessed with success, is not much help there here. Unfortunately, Forbes does not celebrate brilliant investors who went broke because they were unlucky and the market took a sudden nosedive. It does celebrate second rate or reckless investors who got lucky and made a fortune, however. That leaves us in a pickle. When it comes to money, we don't just need to figure out what works and what does not. We also need a way of building randomness into our models. We might not be able to fulfill Schiller's dream and account for the exact role of chance, but as we will see, we can get a handle on the luck. Next is amassing a fortune is easier than keeping hold of it. Making money is all about risk, optimism, and courage. There were few better stock market traders in early 20th century America than Jesse Livermore. Born in 1877, he helped build Wall Street. By the age of 30, he was worth $100 million dollars in today's dollars. Just before the crash of 1929, Livermore made the best decision of his career. He took a short position and bet that stocks would decline. Sure enough, the market lost one third of its total value, while fortunes were liquidated and news spread of bankrupt investors leaping from one office windows. Livermore returned home to his family with the great news. He would just made the modern equivalent of $3 billion. Happy ever after? Not quite. Remember that what we said about success being a lousy teacher. Well, after his big win in 1929, Livermore thought he was untouchable. He placed larger and larger bets and lost big again and again until his fortune was gone. Broke and indebted, he took his own life in a Manhattan club in 1940. Getting rich, it turns out, is sometimes a lot simpler than staying rich. It's easy to see why people who are good at the former often struggle with the latter. Making money is all about risk, optimism, and courage. Keeping money is an entirely different psychological ball game. It's about the fear that everything you would made could be taken away. Staying rich also means being humble. After 1929, Livermore thought he was generous who could not take a wrong step. He would even been better off recognizing that luck had played his part and that his success could not be repeated indefinitely. There are lots of Livermores out there, though their stories are not usually as tragic. Around 40% of all publicly listed companies lose their entire value over time, and the Forbes 400 list of America's richest people has a 20% turnover per decade, excluding cases of death and intra-family transfers. So, how do you keep what you already have? In a word, perseverance. The entrepreneurs who do best stick around for a long time without wiping out. What they all have in common is a single thing called fear. As the multi-billionaire venture capitalist Michael Moritz puts it, when you are scared of losing, you look at potential wins through a different lens. Few gains are large enough to justify risking losing everything you already have. And when you take that view, you are much more likely to make better calls. Envy can make you reckless. Capitalism is great at two things, generating wealth and envy. Capitalism is great at two things, generating wealth and envy. I repeated it. Take a rookie baseball player who makes $500,000 a year. By any reasonable standard, he is rich. But say he plays on the same team as a superstar like Mike Trout, who makes $36 million a year. Suddenly, he is not happy with what he earns. He wants what others have. Meanwhile, high earners like Trout compare themselves to those who earn even more. To make it onto the list of America's top 10 highest paid hedge fund managers in 2018, for example, you have to earn at least $340 million that year. Even Trout is small fry by that standard. In capitalist terms, there's nothing morally wrong with envy, but there is a practical problem. When is enough? Just ask Rajat Gupta. Born in a slum in Kolkata, India, Gupta worked his way up to the corporate ladder to become the CEO of management consulting firm McKinsey. When he retired in 2007, he was worth $100 million. He could have done anything, but Gupta was envious. He wanted to be a billionaire. In 2008, Gupta, a member of the board of directors at Goldman Sachs, learned that Warren Buffett was about to invest $5 billion to keep the firm afloat during the financial crisis. 16 seconds after hearing his news on a conference call, long before it was made public, Gupta dialed the number of a hedge fund manager and bought 175,000 shares of Goldman Sachs. This was insider trading and strictly illegal. Gupta didn't care. He would just made an easy $1 million. By the time prosecutors caught up with him, he would racked up over $17 million in a string of dodgy deals. It had not made him a billionaire, but it was enough to earn him a hefty prison sentence. The moral of the story: envy drives bad calls, and at the cost of those calls is a lot higher than the gains you stand to make. Think of it this way: if you have an insatiable appetite, you will eat until you are sick. But throwing up is a lot worse than any meal is good. So, you don't do that. Leaving opportunities on the table does not necessarily mean you are missing out. It's often recognition that trying to devour anything will push you out to the point of regret. In other words, don't be Rajat Gupta. Next, we will discuss about you can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Making money is all about risk, optimism, and courage. According to his own account, Heinz Bergeron didn't show how much promise in his youth. When he was forced to flee Nazi Germany in 1936, he wasn't sure what to do with his life. After studying literature at the University of California, Berkeley, he worked as a journalist with a sideline in art criticism. In 1940, he bought a small watercolor by an artist called Paul Klee for $100. It was the beginning of a lifelong passion for modern art. Fast forward to the 1990s, and Berggruen had become one of the most successful art collectors of all time. In 2000, he sold his collection to the German government for 100 million euros. Given that it contained a large number of Picassos, Klees, Matisses, and Braque's, that figure was nowhere close to its real worth, which was estimated at $1 billion. Dollars. It was one of the most important collections in the world. How did Berggruen amass this impressive collection of the 20th century's greatest artists? Was it skill or just luck? The investment from Horizon Research has a more interesting answer. According to the company's research, all great collectors do the same thing. They buy vast quantities of art. Some acquisitions turn out to be great investments, especially if the collector holds on to them for a long time. The majority, however, are duds. The trick, as Horizons report notes, is to keep the former until the portfolio return. The value of the entire collection converges upon the return of the best elements in the portfolio. Berggrun's collection was a bit like an index fund. His risks were evenly spread across a wide range of investments. Rather than just buying pieces he happened to like or admire, he bought everything he could get his hands on and waited until a few winners emerged. This strategy applies to all investments, call it a long tail. The tendency of a small number of events to account for the majority of the outcomes. There is a lot of complicated math behind this principle, but it's simple enough when you boil it down to the essentials. Basically, when you get a few things right, you can afford to get more things wrong. Failure is inevitable. What really matters is the nature of your success. Put differently, when you are sitting on one Picasso, you don't have to worry about the 99 duds in your collection. So, the key message in this video is the financial decision making is a lot messier in the real world than it is in the economics textbooks. Lots of decisions, like buying lotto tickets when you are broke, are not rational, but they do make sense in their own way. The same goes for investment choices, which are often driven by people's formative experiences of the economy in the early adulthood rather than cool appraisals of current market conditions. Put simply, financial calls are entangled with psychological factors. So, what's the best way forward? Well, accept that luck plays a role in the success. Learn to fear losing what you already have and hedge your bets. And there you have it, a roadmap to success by understanding how we think about money. If you found this video inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, keep chasing your dreams. We will see you in the next video.